Good morning. We are here to have a chat, an interview with Hermann Ludwig Moeller, the director of the European Space Policy Institute. Welcome, Director. The issue of this interview will be the space economy in Europe with a particular look on the Italian situation and the negotiations between the government and Starlink. So, welcome, Director Moeller. Can you please, introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, buongiorno. A quick introduction to ESPI, European Space Policy Institute. As you just said, we are a European policy think tank, space policy think tank. The easiest explanation is really we connect space to policy to really get space into the policy domain, which is not just policy for space in all sectors of policy. It can be security and defense, it can be green and climate change, it can be transport and energy, just to give examples. We have members, basically all major and all space agencies of Europe, including the Italian Space Agency, but also ESA, also the European Commission, so a wide footprint. And ultimately what we do, we give advice to our stakeholders, also to the European stakeholdership beyond the members, also internationally from the White House to Japan, to also promote European space policy globally. We work on all topics of space, from green and sustainability, exploration and science, security and defense, financing, regulation, law, launchers, orbit safety, the full portfolio. We are a team of about 40 people here in Vienna as the headquarters. We have a small presence in Brussels, and we cover, in terms of expertise, we have lawyers and astrophysicists, we have engineers and political scientists, we have journalists, quite a spectrum.
Director, you are the right person to talk about space, I'm sure. So let's start. You stated that Europe needs a real space strategy. What are the key milestones to achieve this? Please.
First of all, Europe has many space strategies. More than 20 nations in Europe, including Italy, have national strategies. ESA, the European Space Agency, right now is in the process of issuing their strategy for 2040 time horizon. And this is all important and good. I think what we need to work for is really a consultation of these strategies to look into how also national strategies can help on a European level. I take the case of Italy. There are resilience recovery funds being used for space investment, considerable investments in Italy. How can this maybe also be leveraged on a European level, always with the national priorities in mind? So I think it takes a village. This is what we say. It takes everybody to come together and bring their investments to a better effect on a European level. And when you talk in terms of content, and you look to the US and China and elsewhere, there are really two components that define a strategy in space. One, how do you position yourself in human space exploration? There's a lot of talk again about going back to the moon. There is now a lot of talk going to Mars. But this is one big line of space strategy, and NASA and the US stands for this. And the other is security and defense. As the Space Development Agency in the US, it has stepped up considerably in space. And since the war in Ukraine, we also know in Europe that space for crisis situations like these is essential. So any strategy really needs to address this, and ultimately, obviously, also the economic dimension, it is of value to the broader economy. And when you ask me what are the milestones, I think 2025 is a decisive year, because ultimately this is where Europe will come together to make significant space investments in the European Space Agency's Ministerial Conference. This is in November, hosted by Germany. But also the European Commission is starting to shape the next framework program. And as we do this, we really need to see what are the priorities. We need to be pragmatic on the 2 points I mentioned, but also on elements like space for diplomacy, space in Earth observation and beyond, so commercialization of space for climate adaptation, I would argue. Also, science and technology, talent for attracting and keeping talent. There's a big ecosystem in space developing, and we want to retain this for Europe. So those are the elements to make the strategy. I will not advocate for a complex roadmap of designing the perfect strategy. It's more, let us sit together with the strategies we all have in our minds and sometimes spelled out, and see what actions we can take, investments we can make in 25 and towards 28.
Director, let's talk about Iris Square, which is the European main program and project that will be ready not before 2030. What about the investment? Is the investment for Iris 2 is that enough? Should it be doubled? What's your opinion about that?
First of all, very first message is Iris Square is the right thing to do. Would have loved it earlier. I think we could have maybe have, as a European as a whole, be 5 years faster on the map. But it doesn't help to now look back. I think we need to look forward. And here the point is the level of investment sufficient? I think it's good as a first step on the program on its dimension. If you compare it to the other flagships of the EU, Galileo, Copernicus, we are in a similar league in terms of investment. It is unique in the sense that the private investment is significant. So it's the first program that is a public-private undertaking, which is essential. And that brings me to the main point of the program. There is the governmental component. There is the need for governments and secure communication and security and defense also. And this is really what triggered it. But there is also the ambition to use it for commercialization, going beyond and really develop a space infrastructure that can also go beyond the number of satellites we are talking about today. It can also go beyond the payloads and the services we are talking about today. It may be airline connectivity, it may be direct to handheld, it may be coverage of remote regions. There is a whole market that the operators that are leading the consortia are already active in and have revenues of multiple billions per year. So it is really the duality of this to satisfy the governmental demand, also the hard gov, as we call it, but really to leverage for the commercial element. This is essential to do the two.
What do you think about the potential role that a company like Starlink could have, waiting for Iris Square to become, a reality? You know about the debate going on in Italy, so I would like to understand what's your position, and maybe you can help me to understand if there is a position from the European Commission about that, which maybe I missed.
Well, I cannot speak for the European Commission, so I can only speak for our perspective as an independent institute. And I think we are all well advised to look at what is an immediate need. If I have military forces or civil protection forces and they work in the field and they have a need for secure communication today, then the question is who can supply these communications. There are some European solutions, basically from geostationary orbit, and I think they should be used. Spain just launched a new satellite, for instance. That is something that could be in a service as a European supply. But then when it comes to services like Starlink on a different orbit with different capabilities, today we do not have a ready-made solution, as we all know. And then I think it's a fair concern that somebody in the field may have, that he wants to use a service as it is available. So I would be careful in going too quick in saying you cannot procure certain services if there is an immediate need and you do not have a European supply. Having said that, I think the true debate is this should not, and I think this is really an Italian and a European question, it should not condition you not to do your own capability development, because ultimately you want to have the autonomy of action to really use these capabilities when you need them. And we have seen in the case of Ukraine, that the one who's controlling the asset, the Starlink configuration, and in that case, a commercial entrepreneur, he may make decisions that may not be the decisions that governments would take. And ultimately, any government, when it comes to governmental services, have from somebody's capability, but own capability and decision power to use them.
As far as I understand, let me summarize. You say if you need it immediately, you can use it. That's not, a contradiction to invest. And no, you have to invest on a European solution which will be independent and give you independence in the future. That's what.
Absolutely.
So
First is absolutely understandable. I think the mistake would be to turn this into a permanent dependency and not develop your own capability.
That has to do also with all the debate about, the European sovereignty. How do you say, independence, data sovereignty. So we have a commissioner, which is Hanna Virkkunen, which has she's commissioner for the European sovereignty. So for the European policy, for the European Commission, it's a main issue. This is a main issue. So
I would argue it is an issue for every nation of Europe.
For every nation of Europe. So that's the debate going on in Italy at the moment. So maybe Italy can be, a lab for what's going to happen in Europe, even if, it's also a political issue, of course.
I think when you talk about Italy being a lab, I think it can be also in the sense that there are true requirements of security forces and civil protections and other services that are brought to the table, and it's about the true need and the service in response to that need, which today may be served commercially from outside Europe. But that same understanding of what is needed, the same understanding of spelling out into specification of a service that you may want to develop in Europe, that you may want to develop nationally, but also with a European ambition. I mean, this is extremely helpful to also find European solutions. So to have the customer, if you like, on the table, be it on the commercial solution initially, but also being it for preparing the European system and services, this is key. And in that respect, it is a true case from which we can leverage.
Because Iris Square, I mean, can you tell us what's the goal of this Iris Square? Which services will be, compelled in this project? What's the European space strategy behind this project? It's defense, but also commercial.
Yes. As I said, if we, in a first simplification, we split this into governmental services. So the customer is a governmental entity, and the requirements are in the hands of the European Commission, and also the utilization of these capacities and services are under that governance. This is one side. But because it's a public-private partnership, the commercial side, which I said could be direct to handheld or airline connectivity, it can be bridging the digital divide, commercial services to other customers, to a market segment. This will be in the hands of the operators. Yeah. To come back to the governmental side, it is clear there are what we call hard governmental services. So this is really close to security. There's a certain level of protection that is critical. Also, quantum key encryption, distribution is an element that is of high security level, but there may be others depending on the customer on the governmental side. And then there are the middle segment, if you like, and that could be a civil protection agency that may not need the same level of protection, that today, in fact, may be using commercial services, but they should maybe be using a secure comm of a European program. So you have this different shades of gray, if you like, from hard governmental to mid-governmental to commercial, and they are integral part of the same strategy.
Okay, my last question is, during his speech in the Parliament, the European Parliament, a member of the Parliament, Herr Grudler, talking with the Commissioner Kubilius, said that Europe needs a European NASA. What do you think about that? Would such an institution boost investment and public commitment in the space sector? Is that reasonable to have, a European response to NASA?
NASA is an agency of a single country under a single jurisdiction, and Europe does not have a political structure that is comparable. So on this level, you cannot make a one-to-one comparison. This is evident. Secondly, and I always insist on this, 80% of public budgets in Europe are in the hands of national governments and national agencies, including ASI as a prominent one next to France and Germany. Italy is, together with Germany today, in fact, number 2 in terms of space investment when it comes from the public side. More than 50% of this national budget today is going through an agency that is called European Space Agency that will celebrate its 50 years this year, in fact. So I would argue within the European setup of intergovernmental cooperation between the nations of Europe and the main funders of space in Europe, I think we have that agency today that has a technical capability to implement programs. It is in place. Also in programs like Galileo, which are dual use, that is already implemented through the mechanisms of the agency. Obviously, everything can be improved. Everything can be better, and maybe with a strategy, as we said initially, can be further improved. But the question is also, what would it take to create yet another entity? How many years would it take when the race is on? And I tell you, we have maybe 2 to 5 years. This is the time window for Europe to get real. Otherwise, we will be passengers and we will not sit on the table. So there is certainly an understandable call for the ideal solution. I would say, again, I come back to what I said before, it takes a village. Let's come together with the actors we are, with the capabilities we are, with the national agencies and the governments like Italy and the government and ASI as an agency and the European agency, the Knesses and the DLRs of Germany and France and others, also the Norwegian agency and the Swiss Space Office, also the UK Space Agency and UK as an actor also in security. I think this is what we can leverage. We have the tools, we have the mechanisms, we have the skill set of 5,000 people in the case of ESA, but also in national agencies. And this is the pragmatic way to go, and we should really take this route, and we need to take it quick.
Thank you very much, Director Moeller, Director of the European Space Policy Institute. Thank you for your time, for your vision, and see you soon again to talk about these issues. Thank you very much.
È stato un piacere, grazie.
Grazie mille.